start. Good afternoon and welcome to Midday Moms. This is Dorothy Pilarski, and it's nice to see you. I'm really glad that you're, joining us today. And as you're signing on, please do say hello to us in the chat box. And just for those of you who maybe are signing on for the first time, I'll tell you just a little bit about myself. My name is Dorothy Pilarski, and I'm the founder of a ministry, CatholicMomsGroup.com. We work in partnership with the Archdiocese of Toronto in helping parishes start Catholic moms groups. And the pandemic brought us here virtually online, and I'm thrilled today to have with me a very, very special guest, Michelle Sachs. Michelle, do you want to tell the moms that are signing on, can you tell us just a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So hi everybody, my name is Michelle and I am a mom of 4. We live in New Hamburg, Ontario, and you know what, we find ourselves homeschooling this year. And so that really takes a lot of my introduction, brain space identity at the moment. But yeah, I co-host a podcast called the Modern Lady Podcast with my friend Lindsay Murray. And between that and homeschooling, we're just, living life, striving for holiness like all of you, and really excited to come back and visit you all again here on Midday Moms. I so enjoy the time that I spend here with you guys on Thursday afternoons.
Yeah, and so we've got someone here, Jacqueline Novak is saying, love, love, love your podcast. So for those of you that,
yes, thank you.
Yeah, so for those of you that are interested in listening to Michelle's podcast, look up the Modern Lady Podcast. Is that right? Did I get it right?
That's right. Yeah, you can find us on social media by that handle. So on Instagram and Facebook, we're at the Modern Lady Podcast.
Yeah, so we're so thrilled to have Michelle here. She's been on Midday Moms, on several occasions, and I hope and pray that we'll have her back again. But before I get too excited, again, we're on a mission. Our ministry is on a mission to revive the vocation of motherhood. And we do so primarily by helping mothers, helping parishes start Catholic moms groups. I'm going to share with you just a very short 2 or 3 minute video that tells you a little bit about Catholic Moms Group. I would encourage you to visit our website. It's really easy to remember. It's 3 words, CatholicMomsGroup.com. And again, we help parishes start Catholic moms groups. And I'll share with you our little short video. And so when you go to Catholic Moms Group, you're going to see this, start a Catholic moms group. And we help parishes start 3 types of groups. We help them start either a mother's group for moms only, mothers and tots, or if you'd like to start a virtual mother's group, we can help you do that as well. Right now, we receive new parishes by parishes submitting an application. We are parish-based, so the moms groups that we do run are always associated with a parish. And I'm going to share with you again our very short promo video. Whoops, sorry.
Mothers, by our very nature, we are nurturing, loving caregivers. We are social beings, made for friendship and community. We are also spiritual by nature, made by a loving God to know Him and love Him, and to pass this love of our Catholic faith on to our children. But right now, many mothers feel overextended, distracted, and exhausted. Though as Catholics, we have the community of our church, many mothers attending Mass could not name the moms sitting next to them in the pew they share. Community and support among Catholic mothers is desperately needed in this hectic and chaotic culture. Your parish needs you to bring these moms together.
Hi, my name is Dorothy Pilarski. I'm the founder of Catholic Moms Group. We at Catholic Moms Group are on a mission to revive the vocation of motherhood. We exist to bring together like-minded, faith-filled mothers who crave community and are focused on spiritual growth, Catholic teaching, and fellowship. Can you imagine a thriving, engaged mothers group at your parish? A group of moms in love with their Catholic faith, ready to serve other mothers no matter what stage of motherhood they're at. Can you imagine what a difference that would make at your parish? Starting a mothers group, it's not rocket science, but working with a team who's done it before and who's done it dozens and dozens of times sure does help. The Catholic Moms Group membership site is an online community that offers training, resources, and dozens of tools for parishes to help them start a mothers group quickly and efficiently. We're here to provide you with a clear path to launching a Catholic Moms Group at your parish. All of our materials are 100% Catholic. We have clearly laid out meetup plans for both moms groups and toddler groups. We are obedient to the magisterium of the Catholic Church. We have created dozens of tools that are going to save you time and energy. And besides that, we love our Blessed Mother. We constantly turn to her for her intercession. You can make a huge impact in your parish, so join us. We are revolutionizing the way parishes start mothers groups by providing parishes with a Catholic Mothers Group starter kit and by nourishing and training a community of Catholic Mothers Group leaders across the world. It's time to start a mothers group at your parish. Join us today. I don't know about you, but every time I watch that little video, I get so excited about the ministry all over again. So we have helped, over 45 parishes start a Catholic Moms Group. And what you see here on Midday Moms is not a moms group because we're not all together and, we don't pray together and we don't have the fellowship, but it gives you a glimpse of a part of our mothers group. And so we have workshops for mothers group leaders to train them how to become a mothers group leader. And I've hosted a mothers group. My daughter is 26. She's getting married a week tomorrow. And I started my mothers group while I was still expecting with her because I'm an overachiever. And I really hope to help you start a Catholic Moms Group because being surrounded by Catholic women that are committed to your sanctity and committed to you praying with you and teach you about the faith, it's nothing short of life transforming. So please, think about it. Maybe the Holy Spirit's giving you a little nudge to start a Catholic Moms Group. We'd love to help you. Anyway, back to Michelle. One of the reasons we invited Michelle to speak about, Dr. Hildegard von Bingen is because my daughter is getting married on September the 17th. And a couple of weeks ago, she said, Mom, I was on the treadmill and I kind of was wondering when I was on the treadmill what feast day our wedding is on, because it's kind of remarkable that her wedding this year it's on a Friday, and that's because of COVID and all of the limitations and so on and so forth. And she goes, it's on, our wedding is on the feast of, this is Hildegard von Bingen. Do you know anything about her? And the funny thing was that I had just bookmarked about 4 podcasts about her, and I had just ordered 2 of her books, and it just seemed like a bit of a God incidence. We know we don't like the word coincidence here. And then I thought, I just don't feel like I'm smart enough to talk about her, but I know someone who is. And so I reached out to Michelle, and I said, Michelle, do you feel like taking on the challenge? I know that, that this particular saint is remarkable. And without skipping a heartbeat, Michelle said yes. So I want to thank you publicly for your yes. Thank you very, very much for your yes. Can you tell us a little bit about why you just so instantly said yes and what you've learned about her?
Yeah, well, you know what, Dorothy, I'll just continue your God incident story with how it feeds into my own. And I didn't realize it was your daughter that kind of spurred all of this on. I'll make sure to pray for St. Hildegard's intercession for her next week on her wedding day. But for me, St. Hildegard has been popping up as well all summer. So, anytime I'd be on social media or I'd read an article or I'd be in conversation with someone, her name would come up. And, we often talk on the podcast as well about how sometimes it's the saints who pursue you, right? If they have a particular reason for wanting us to get to know them. And that's happened a couple of times with me and this summer, St. Hildegard. So when you messaged me and asked specifically for this topic, I felt like it was something I should not be refusing. And so I was happy to jump right on that and get to learning about her. But as what you and I were talking about before we went live here is that with St. Hildegard, where does one begin? Like, she is a giant. And
isn't she? Yeah. And so you mentioned that you've kind of prepared a bit of a reflection for us in 3 parts. Can you tell us a little bit about the 3 parts before you begin the 3 parts?
Yeah, sure. So this was the easiest way I felt like I could approach St. Hildegard to begin research. We'll talk a little about who she was, so a little bit of her biography and her life, and then maybe talk a bit about her works. Now, I'll say some of her works because there are a lot of them. So we'll pick a couple of them to really focus on. And if we have time, I'd love to talk about some of the reasons why I think that she could be nudging some of us to get to know her better, how she's still so relevant today when Pope Benedict XVI was one who canonized her, and he called her perennially relevant. I hope I said that right.
Well, like a flower. So right. I want to just say hello to a few people. Amanda Sage, hello. Thank you for joining us. Jacqueline, thank you for joining us. And Lucy, thank you for joining us. We do encourage you to say hello to us in the chat. If you have any questions or you have any experience or any resources related to this remarkable saint, please feel free to post them. We like we like these Midday Mom sessions to be interactive, so please don't hesitate to chat with us. So tell us, Michelle, a little bit about her life, her background.
Yeah. So like we were saying, and I think I say this every time I'm with you, Dorothy, on Midday Moms, is that I am a mother. I'm not a theologian. I'm not a doctor. I don't have a doctorate in philosophy or anything like that. So when we titled this talk, Making Her Acquaintance, Making the Acquaintance of St. Hildegard, we're just learning more about her as well. So we'll do our very best to give you an overview, but then maybe some resources for you to go look further into her. So, Hildegard, let's start when she was born. She was born in the year 1098. And she was born in the area of the Rhineland in Germany. So she was actually part of the lower nobility. Her family was part of the lower nobility, which meant that they weren't high ranking enough to be titled per se, but that they could use the term von in their name. That was often a way that the lower nobility families would distinguish themselves as that mid-ground between commoner and royalty, essentially. So she was the youngest of 10 children, and she was rather sickly as a child. And so she often had a nurse with her, caring for her. And I think that there's one story about her and her nurse that perfectly illustrates her starting out and her beginning. So the story goes that she was walking with her nurse one day outside, and they passed a field, and she pointed to a cow who was pregnant in the field. And she says, look how beautiful the calf is. Oh, it's pure white, and it has a spot on its forehead and spots on its back and a spot on its foot. And the nurse is sitting here going, it's not even born yet. So the nurse goes to tell Hildegard's mother, who takes note of it. And when the calf is born, they realize that Hildegard was correct. She perfectly described this calf. And so that story was used, I believe, during her canonization process, which we'll talk more about in a little bit, hopefully. But I thought that was a perfect introduction to who we're dealing with here. Just she's always had visions from a very young age, the connection with being able to see what we all see, but maybe on a deeper level, especially in the natural world around her.
Yeah, and I as a part of my reading, I also learned that she was given by her family as a tithe to a monastery, being the 10th child. I was like, oh my gosh, families were a lot holier than they are now. Like, not many of us would say, well, I'm going to give my 10th child to the church or to a monastery. I just wanted to acknowledge here, Jacqueline Novak is saying hello from Iowa, and she's mentioning Abiding Together podcast did a study on the women doctors of the church, and they have a great episode on Saint Hildegard. So for those of you that are intrigued by today's session, please look that up. And we also have hello from Muggs Mortha. I have loved Saint Hildegard for a very long time, and yes, she pursued me, and so she's pursuing a lot of us. And yeah. we're needing a revival of some of her just teachings and philosophy. And I think that women are just being called to holiness, and to lean on maybe not Glamour magazine, Cosmopolitan, and to introduce these saints to our daughters, right? Because I think our daughters are very, very hungry for remarkable, holy, mystical souls that are very fruitful, So anyway, I don't mean to interrupt. So there's the cow story that she was high. Tell us a little. I don't mean to reduce it to that. I'm sorry.
That's what was in my notes.
Yeah.
Like, I thought briefly mentioned, but not explained. And so for a while it sat in my notes as Saint Hildegard cow? Question mark. So finally found it for you.
Yes. She's a mystic and a visionary. She could literally see things that other people couldn't see when she was 3 and 4 years old. Yeah.
So to your point, Dorothy, when she was 8, she was given as an oblate to the Benedictine monastery. And an oblate is a person who is specifically dedicated to God or the service of God. So she was put under the care of a woman named Jutta. I think that's how you pronounce it. Jutta. Jutta. And she was actually the sister of the count of their area that Hildegard's family worked for. So she was another daughter who was given as an oblate to the church. And it was Jutta who is thought to be responsible for Hildegard's education. But it wasn't necessarily a formal education. She didn't go to school. She didn't have a formal tutor, but she did learn to read and write. And she learned Latin informally from Jutta. And it's remarkable. I think this is one of the things that I thought, it would be nice for us as parents to know this about Hildegard today, that, you know, Hildegard ended up writing 9 books in Latin, and her education was overseen by this other young woman. And so, you know, when children are loved well, their education kind of, it follows.
Yeah,
So
and
really
the other little sort of tidbit that I found fascinating was that her parents actually asked Hildegard her permission, that can she be given, and that, you know, Hildegard was very much against parents who kind of gave their children to a particular order without asking the child's permission. And so she did this, you know, she did this freely, you know, as well, which again, I thought, you know, maybe do we expect too little of our children, right? We're not teaching them Latin. We're not perhaps suggesting, you know, the vocational life. And so she really has challenged, you know, me personally. Sometimes we think as moms, oh, you know, I do so much. I, you know, have this podcast, I have this mother's group. And I'm like, yeah, look at Hildegard. So anyway, I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. When she was in the monastery, like you were saying, this was her choice. And I think we can gather that even from the fact that she decided on her own to take her vows when she was about 14 or 15 years old. So she did become then a Benedictine nun after all those years. But Hildegard never stopped being sickly. And because of that, she spent a lot of time alone, even in the convent. And so it was during this time that her visions really continued. And what I found really interesting was that she, you know, she talks about having a lot of self-doubt when it comes to her visions. And she wasn't really sure that what she was seeing, first of all, was like legitimate. And then once she did discern that, yes, this was from God, whether she should tell anybody about it. And there is a quote here that she says herself, because she writes a lot autobiographically in some of her books. She says, up to my 15th year, I saw much and related some of the things seen to others who would inquire with astonishment when such things might come. Oh, sorry, that's my phone ringing in the background. Just ignore that. She would say that I wondered, and during my sickness, I asked one of my nurses whether she also saw similar things. And when she answered no, a great fear befell me. Infrequently in my conversation, I would relate future things, but noting the amazement of my listeners, I became more reticent. So here is another thing I think about Hildegard that many of us could probably relate to, is that sometimes we might get a sense of something, even spiritually, and we might test it out on people. We're looking for someone to help us discern or someone to give us advice, and we're fearful of the reactions of other people. And here is a saint who had literal visions from God going through the same thing, and yet she persevered in remaining open to receiving whatever God was giving her, and remained persistent in trying to figure out what it all meant for her, even at a young age.
Yeah, and I think too, the fact that she was sickly, right? Like, I've struggled with more illnesses that I'm gonna talk about right now, and many of them remarkable illnesses. And I don't know, it gave me great consolation. And I think it should give great consolation to all of us that are here. I think that sometimes, you know, our culture is so obsessed with, you know, perfect health and perfect Instagram profile and perfect family life. And so despite her sickness, despite her, you know, almost lifelong sickliness, yet she was like so fruitful, right? And so maybe if any of you are struggling with any type of illnesses, like maybe it's time to stop feeling sorry for yourself and asking yourself, like, God, how could I use this suffering in order to be more fruitful? Like, if I unite my suffering with yours, you know, please help this suffering make my life more fruitful in, particular ways, or to offer the suffering up for specific intentions. So I was really deeply consoled by her sickliness. I don't mean that sounds terrible, but you know what I mean, right?
And you know what? The reminder too that that God works in all areas of our life, even through sickness, because how Saint Hildegard, the convent she was originally at when Jutta died, she was unanimously voted as the new I forget what the term is, leader. Forgive me.
Or
you know what I mean?
The head lady.
Yes. The abbess, maybe?
The abbess or something.
The leader.
Yeah.
She was unanimously voted in, and she started getting a sense, or the abbot, the priest who was there, wanted for Hildegard to become the prioress, which would kind of change things a little bit in the order, and it would make the nuns a little bit more under the leadership of the priests, and that they would be more united. And she was getting a sense that the convent, the order was going in a different direction. And so she wanted to move the nuns from Dissenbodenberg, and where they were, to Bingen. And the abbot said no. And she fell really physically ill, to the point where it paralyzed her and made her bedridden for a long time. And she said it was because, God really was asking this of her. And so the abbot, he held firm until he himself could not move her physically. And then he thought, okay, I guess this is something we need to listen to. And so he gave them permission. And then that's how the nuns moved to Bingen. And that's how, Saint Hildegard von Bingen, von being the, of Bingen. So even through all that, it was for a greater purpose.
And that holy stubbornness, right? That holy
Yeah, she could be the patron saint of that too, I think. And you're right, to put holy in front of it is a good point, because she knew when to do it. And when to,
yes,
right?
Yeah, a holy stubbornness, yes.
Yeah. So, going back to her visions for a second and her self-doubt, I found it really interesting. So this is after they moved to Bingen. The nuns are situated there, and these visions are continuing. She's decided at this point, or she's discerned at this point, that they are indeed from God. They are revelations to her spiritually, but she's still conflicted whether or not she should publish them or write them down or tell others about them. So she ends up writing to another saint who was her contemporary at the time. And I love this connection. I love when saints know each other. I feel like it really solidifies their humanity and their friendships. But she ends up writing to the abbot of the Cistercian monastery, who is the future Saint Bernard of Clairvaux. And she writes to him to ask for advice and what he thinks about all these visions and what she should do with them. And he replies very favorably to her, and he encourages her to continue receiving the visions and writing them down. He begins to introduce other people to her writings and to her visions. And the story goes that when St. Hildegard's archbishop finally brings part of her writings, which would make up part of her first book, Scivias, to the Pope, her archbishop brought it to St. Eugenius III, I believe was the Pope at the time. It was actually St. Bernard of Clairvaux who, on the other side of the Pope, was saying, you should listen to this woman, you should read her works. And I believe the Pope was also a Cistercian, so they had that fraternal rapport with one another. And so really, if it weren't for St. Bernard of Clairvaux, we may not have so much access to St. Hildegard today. He really brought it to the Pope's attention. When the Pope read through her works, he gave her papal approval and encouraged her to continue to write. And so she did, and she finished Scivias, which translates to know the way. She finished it 10 years later. It was finally done. And I think with the papal approval, she was finally confident that this was indeed where God wanted her.
It's I love every aspect of that story, because I don't know about any of you moms, but like sometimes we have like a sense of something, or sometimes we, and our family and friends, they might think that we're kind of like nuts, or religious or something, right? And it's so important to have holy friends, or good, friends that are trying to be obedient and submissive to the Catholic Church and are trying to grow in holiness, so that you can run things by them, so that you're not alone in your journey. And to me, that's what's been remarkable about having a moms group, because one of our mothers group leaders is here today. She's Krystyna Zasowski from All Saints Parish in Etobicoke. And I can't tell you on how many occasions, like Krystyna has 8 children, and she's got, I think, 4 or 5, 6 grandkids. But at the same time, she skis, and at the same time, she's beautiful and fashionable. And she just danced up to storm the other night at a wedding with my son. And so she's hip and fun, and I love her to pieces. And I don't know how many times I've called Krystyna and said, I don't know what to do here. What do I do? Right. And I know that, she's striving to live a obedient and fruitful and Catholic, life. And so anyway, I love that idea too, that St. Hildegard was reaching out to these other holy souls, right? And we need to be surrounded by holy souls to help us on our journey, right? Anyway, sorry, I don't mean to go on my little rants, but no, but it's just so important. It's so important. It's just so important. That's why I like having a mother's group. It's just literally changed my life. Like I think of my life from when I was in corporate 100%, and the women that I was surrounded by, versus now having, a group of remarkable women. It's just such a gift, such a real gift. Anyway, I'm sorry. So what else can you tell us about St. Hildegard?
Well, you know what, once she kind of got Scivias written, and this is a book of 26 of her visions, and then she got that papal approval and encouragement. She has St. Bernard of Clairvaux in her corner, other holy men and women. She really kind of just goes for it after that, right? She ends up writing 2 more books on visions that she has. She writes a book on medicine and natural healing. And she ends up composing many, many pieces of music and a play, which I'll talk about in a minute. But just to kind of go back to what you were saying, Dorothy, about even no matter where you are, so you were in both the corporate world and now you are here running a ministry and things like that, you are who God meant for you to be in all of those places. Right? Wherever God meant for you to be. Hildegard was a nun, but she also was very interested and had a gift for herbology and the natural sciences. She had a gift and a tendency towards music and composing. She finds herself in a lot of different worlds, and she finds herself there just by being true to who God has made her to be. And I think that's a huge message that we need actually to take note of with St. Hildegard, is that so many of us are so gifted in all kinds of areas, and we were specifically meant to be in those areas, so when it all comes back to glorifying God, your gifts and your talents are such beautiful witnesses to him. And we definitely see that. I didn't look too much into her natural sciences thing, because that is not my natural tendency. But I do want to just say one little note about St. Hildegard, because I came across it in my research. So if anyone else is going to look further into her, because of that interest of hers, secularly outside the church, she has been a little bit adopted, I guess you could say, by the New Age movement. And so to be a little bit careful about the sources that you're reading about her from, because there have been, I know there was a little notice on catholicculture.org while I was reading about her, just to be aware of that because of her work in herbology and natural science, that she can sometimes be, I don't know what you would call it, like kind of brought under the umbrella of a new age.
Yeah, so I think it's extremely important because, you know, there are many, you know, secular atheists, different people that go on the Hildegard bandwagon, and they, you know, they proclaim a lot of different things about Hildegard without mentioning the fact that she was obedient to church teaching, that she's a Catholic saint, that she was devoted to Eucharistic adoration, that she was devoted to the Eucharist, and that, you know, and so I noticed that same thing. And that I find that too, even in certain Catholic circles, you know, some people are taking her and almost misusing her, and misguiding, you know, people. So I really do encourage each and every one of you that when you are studying her, that just as Michelle said, that you make sure that you're getting your information from a solid Orthodox Catholic source that doesn't have an axe to grind with our magisterium and our hierarchy. Okay, so just be careful. I'm glad that you mentioned that, because I noticed that as well, and I think it's taken even some Catholics off track. So we need to be careful. So this woman had so many gifts, so many talents. Each and every one of us have so many gifts and so many talents, and sometimes we're not using our gifts, right? And and we could be. So tell us more.
Well, as I said, I didn't go too deeply into her natural sciences background in her book on medicine, but I did look a little bit into her music compositions, and I found her so interesting. And this is where I really saw Saint Hildegard and found a lot of information from her in non-Catholic sources. I just think it's pretty incredible that this woman who lived centuries ago and who composed music for her nuns in the convent is still so referenced in a secular context in regards to music, even how she wrote music. So she, I guess, is one of the few, well, I have it here. She's one of the few medieval composers, I guess, that we still have original compositions by her. And she wrote in what's called monophony. So sometimes we hear about polyphony in church music especially, but hers is monophony. So it's like often characterized by one line of melody unaccompanied by harmonizing or instruments or anything like that. And she ends up writing 77 songs that form up the liturgical year. And the most interesting one, I've been building up to this because I'm very excited to tell you about her play. She wrote an entire play and musical that's sung, and it's called Ordo Virtutum. And it's about the virtues and morality. So I'm going to set the stage for you here. The play takes place, it starts out as a conversation between 17 virtues and the patriarchs and the prophets of the Old Testament. And they're going back and forth in kind of like this, like complimenting battle almost. Like the patriarchs are telling the virtues like, oh my goodness, you are what life is all about. And you're so important and you're so beautiful. And this is sung by men with their deep voices. And then the virtues would respond, and these would be the nuns singing in their high voices back to the patriarchs, like, well, you're the ones that have shown the world how to live by us and all these things. And so after that introduction, the protagonist enters, and it's the soul of a young woman who is just so in love with God and the things of heaven. She asks the virtues if she could just skip life and go straight to heaven. Don't we all want that too? And the virtues have to break it to her that no, unfortunately, you do have to go through life. That's how it works. And the soul is disheartened by this, and that opens up the door just a crack for Satan to enter the picture. So Satan would have been the only part really played by a man. The lower voices, I think, could have been sung by women as well, but Satan was always played by a man, maybe the monk or the priest at the convent. And the rest of the play, the body of it, goes by with each virtue appealing to the soul as to why they can help her, will help her, their place in the natural order of things, the spiritual order of things, with Satan every once in a while interjecting doubts, insults, things to try to draw the soul away. And so I don't know if a few hundred years is long enough that I can give spoilers of how it ends. I think if you haven't seen it by now, I'm just kidding. But the way it ends is that the soul does end up choosing the virtues. And so the virtues then bind Satan and kick him out. And then they go into the last section of the play, which is all about singing about the glory of salvation and what Jesus Christ has done for us and bringing it back home, essentially. But there are a few really interesting things that Hildegard does with the actual writing of the music and the writing of the play that I think, just in addition to just being a creative mind to come up with this story, also shows how she uses even the technique itself to storytell. So one of the things is that, she's known for her beautiful melodies, but Satan does not sing. He has no singing parts. All he does is he grunts and yells. And she did that on purpose because she said Satan cannot participate in the divine harmony of the universe. He's not capable of singing, of joining in with this. And she illustrates this by not giving the role any singing parts. And so you can actually go on YouTube and you can find a performance of this play. And you'll see that whenever Satan speaks, it's like a really gravelly, biting, yelling kind of a voice. And then the virtues respond, and it's beautiful melody. And I've just loved her creativity in that too.
Yeah, one of in one of the books that I found that was written about her, opposed to written by her, they had listed 23 of the virtues that she espouses or encourages us to grow in, with the opposing vices. And when I first discovered her, I printed this list, and every morning I was reviewing the list of, virtues, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I see so many of my vices there, right? It was such a kind of exciting practice in the morning to be reviewing the virtues, and then it got me thinking, that as mothers, are we doing that? Are we trying to foster virtues in our children, right? Because, so often now as mothers, yes, we're trying to make sure that, yes, our children are educated, and yes, that they have, the latest computer, and that, yes, that they go to the right university. But are we focused on hoping that our children grow in virtue? Are we ourselves, do we measure our days when we do an examination of conscience at the end of the day, whether or not we've grown in virtue? And she just got me so excited about the virtues again, So I'm really glad that you brought up that play. And the fact that you can go on YouTube and listen to the music of a nun that lived how many years ago, right? It's just it really is remarkable.
It is. And you know what? I heard a lecturer speaking on St. Hildegard when I was doing my research, suggesting, now this is her suggestion, but I kind of like it, she said that it's possible Hildegard wrote this play and that they performed it often, but that they used it as an examination of conscience for the nuns, and that they would rotate through the roles of virtues, and each nun would have a chance to be a virtue, and that would probably give you quite a perspective on how strong or weak that virtue is in your own life, I would imagine. So
that's what a beautiful that's
idea.
Yeah, what a good idea.
Yes. So yeah, like there's all kinds of things. Oh, the one other thing about the play, which I think is just interesting if you were ever going to check it out for yourself, is that it uses what's called hang on, I have it written down here. Lots of big words today. Oh, it was melismatic. So melismatic means that one syllable can contain many notes. Those will be the notes that you think, like if you're going to sing love, you wouldn't just say love, you would say love. Many notes, one syllable. And she uses that a lot, but on purpose, because the last part of the play, like I was mentioning to you, really dealt with salvation. And the very last word of the whole play is, it's porajat or poragat, I'm not sure, but it means to stretch out. It's talking about how God stretches out to all of us. And that is the longest melismatic line in the whole play. They hold that one word for 39 different notes, because Hildegard wanted it to seem like the hand of God was reaching that far out towards the people who were watching it and viewing it. So
I think she's reaching out to us now, today, using Zoom and using Michelle. Like I just have this sense that Hildegard is calling us into a higher level of being.
And so, I'm mindful of the time here, Dorothy, but there's just one other aspect of Hildegard that I think that we would be really interested to learn more about her, and that is of her role as doctor of the church, kind of what that means, and what it means about some of the things that she did in her life, especially talking or combating heresies that were going on in the church at the time. So, very briefly, Doctor of the Church is a title conferred to certain saints. There are parameters or three conditions to be named a doctor of the church. One, you have to live a life of exemplary holiness. So basically, you need to be a saint. The second one is that you must have somehow contributed to deepening the church's understanding of its teachings and divine revelation. And then the third is, oh dear, I dropped my notes. I can't. Oh, a pope has to name you a doctor of the church. So those are the three things. And the church currently has, I believe it's 36 doctors of the church. And Saint Hildegard is one of the newest ones. She was only canonized in 2012 by Pope Benedict XVI. So I was really surprised by that, because I feel like the church has talked about her a lot longer. That was the sense I got from it. And it's true that the church really just during her canonization, they were giving her what was called an equivalent canonization, which essentially means that for some reason, the formal process of canonization was never completed. She was a blessed for a long time, but that she already had kind of a veneration and a following that was already recognized by the church, especially in her local area. And so the equivalent canonization essentially is just making things global, like it's for the universal church now, and bringing her in. So that only just happened in 2012. She's a recent saint, and then being named a doctor of the church because of her writings and everything to do with that. It's very clear. So I was doing a little bit of research into other doctors of the church. And one of the things that I found really interesting was that, they all had those three things in common, but they were so wildly different from one another. You know, you had doctors of the church who led scandalous lives before their conversions, like St. Augustine, right? Versus doctors of the church that may not have ever committed a mortal sin their entire life, like St. Therese, the little flower. You had saints that, you know, were pretty temperamental and would have been described as grumpy, like St. Jerome. And you had saints that were always described as pretty easygoing, like St. Teresa of Avila. And you have other saints, and this is where Hildegard comes in, and I loved this distinction. You had saints that were very into penance and mortification. They were very called to lead a life of that, like St. Catherine of Siena. But then you have saints like St. Hildegard, who, you know, especially being a part of the natural science, she really believed in moderation in all things. And she actually really discouraged her nuns from skipping sleep. She encouraged them to have healthy lifestyles and things like that. So the doctors of the church form a broad spectrum, but they all somehow contributed to this divine understanding of the church and the magisterium and scripture and teachings. And the other thing that the doctors of the church all have in common is that they all in some way battled heresy from within the church, or controversy and conflict within their own orders. And so you have, for example, you have St. Robert Bellarmine, I believe he was instrumental in talking about Protestantism. You have St. John of the Cross and St. Teresa of Avila, who were instrumental in reforming their own orders. And then, so that's something that all the doctors of the church have in common. And so where does Hildegard fit in? Well, she ended up being asked by the Pope to join this team, we'll say, of people who he wanted to encourage to go and speak to a group called the Cathars. They are also known as the Albigensians. So this is a heresy that began in the south of France. And they believed a lot of interesting things. One of which was like a duality of God. They believed there was a good God of the New Testament, of the spiritual realm, and a bad God of the Old Testament who created the world. And therefore, creation is not good. Creation is evil. And so they were talking about how one reaches perfection by eschewing everything of the natural world. And that presents a lot of problems for Catholics, especially when it comes to, you know, marriage and childbirth. They believed that it was not good of you to want to have children because you're going to be trapping a pure soul into a body. You know, they believed, you know, that presents problems for our teachings on the incarnation and Mary, our Blessed Mother. And so the church, the Pope, was really anxious to have people speak to the Cathars and try to work out this heresy. And St. Hildegard was one of those people he asked. And I just think that that is such a wonderful choice on his part, because she was so involved in both mystical revelation. She knew the spiritual realm like better than most people living at the time, but she also had this hand in the physical natural world too. And Hildegard's big thing was that there is meant to be unity among all things, right? There's meant to be unity between religion and science, science and logic, God and his creation, and that sin was the thing that broke us all apart. And so, you know, amongst all the other things we talked about today, I think that is one last thing I would say we need to really dig into praying to St. Hildegard for, is this understanding of unity in the church and in the world, and knowing the holy stubbornness, you know, when to dig our heels in and when to promote unity, because ultimately that is God's will for all of us. And Jesus prayed, Lord, like Father, make them one as we are one. And she really lived that, even when it came to battling it out with heretics of her time.
Yeah, and isn't it remarkable in a way that she seems to be emerging tapping, so many Catholics' shoulders right now, smack in the middle of a pandemic where there is so much division, right? And where we all are like searching for health and wholeness and safety. And that, I've been turning to her, more and more often, not only my daughter's, future husband, he's a part-time musician. And so I've been turning to her, like, bless his work. And then, I've written a few, books and things. And so, and then I have so many medical issues. So I've also been, turning to her for healing and guidance, during this time where there is so much division about, so many different things. Can you kind of also just give us a sense of why St. Hildegard might be someone that each of us might learn more about? Like, what would you say to, like, why is she relevant today, besides maybe some of the things I've just mentioned? How can we encourage, and what can moms do to get to know her a little more? Like, maybe we can kind of summarize with that a little bit.
Yeah, so to summarize then, I really think that through my research, what I ended up really taking from St. Hildegard was that we are able to pray to her when we're trying to discover our gifts and our talents, and which ones of those are going to give God the greatest glory, how to use them to give God the greatest glory, and to not be afraid to do that. She was a woman of action, but she's no stranger to doubts and uncertainties, yet she found ways to persevere in those, and look what she did with her life, right? And I think that if each one of us were to do that and to ask her help in doing that, in her intercession to do that, I think we could see such transformation happening in the lives of women and our families and our communities and the world. So that would be one thing. And then again, like I mentioned before, and you summarized this as well, that in a time when it is extremely stressful for many people, and nerves are very, very frayed, and we haven't seen people very much the last few years, we have to get back into this sense of belonging and unity with one another, and because that is God's will. And Hildegard understood that. She saw it both within her interests and hobbies and in her communities, and wanting to bring people into the church and reconcile church teaching to the modern issues of her day. And so I think we can do that too, and we can ask her intercession for wisdom on how to speak, on when to speak, and to have courage in doing so, but ultimately putting God first and having respect and just that balance between respect and obedience, and wisdom and understanding, and a discerning eye to what's going on in the world around us.
And the other thing too is that this time alone that all of us have had to embrace on different levels, and going into sort of different phases, during the pandemic, that much good can come out of spending more time out of the world, and in trying to make one's home a more, monastic home. Like, now don't look at my kitchen behind the picture, because you won't see a monastic one right now. A week before a wedding, and we're going we just got news yesterday too that the groom's mom and dad are flying in from Poland, right? So it's all very, very exciting. But that I'm always encouraging moms that are joining us, or moms that are a part of our Mother's Ministry, to remember that God can use anything to do anything. So just not to look at this current crisis that we're in as being 100% bad, that there could be a silver lining, there could be gifts, and they're not all gifts, but like not to miss God's grace in the middle of the chaos, because yes, Hildegard was sickly, Hildegard was battling heresy, Hildegard was given by her family, to a monastery. So it like her life wasn't free of pain before she became fruitful. And I would like to encourage each and every one of you that once we actually do upload this video to YouTube, which will be after the wedding, is to share it with your daughters, because I think that the radical feminists really got the world's attention because, women felt that they weren't, doing enough, creating enough. And I just think that if we were all more aware of the Hildegards and St. Catherine of Siena and of Avila and of Calcutta, we wouldn't need the feminist movement, because we see how much these incredible women, accomplished. I always, just in closing, used to say my mom never needed the feminist movement. She had the Holy Spirit, and that kept her real busy. Because if we listen to the promptings of the Holy Spirit, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, look at the hundreds of thousands of people that have listened to your podcast from all over the world.
Yeah, that's right. Unexpected. And yet we just did what we felt God gave us talent for. And look what happened, right?
Yes.
We're in our wildest dreams, but we often say the Holy Spirit is the producer, and he is that for every person in their gifts and talents, right?
Yes.
Say, God, I'd like to do this for you. I'd like to use my talents. I don't know how, but I'm open to whatever. And then the opportunity comes, say yes, and then see what happens.
Yeah, I want to mention just in closing, it is 3:02 and we close at 3. And, Michelle's got, lots of kids and she's homeschooling. So I'm really grateful for the time. But Ave Maria Press is publishing a new book for moms. It's the Ave Catholic Prayer Book for Moms. And if you got an invitation to this, you would have gotten, if you're in the United States, there's a code that you can use to get a discount on the book and to get free shipping. And I'm a contributor. I contribute a prayer in that book of prayers. And if you're from Canada, Novalis has agreed to create a link for me so that I can offer you a discount as well. So just be patient with me. But I was looking at the prayer book, and it is just so beautiful. So I really, I'm planning to buy 10 copies so that I can give them out as gifts at Christmas time. So if you're a dear friend, you might be getting anyway, Michelle, I wanted to I wanted to encourage you in your speaking. You have a you're just a tremendous, remarkable gift. I could listen, it's like listening to the symphony.
Oh, wow, thank you.
And if there's anything that I could do to encourage you or help you in your continued ministry, I know that every time we have you on as a guest, I'm so deeply touched and edified in my heart, just feels so blessed by your gifts. So thank you for sharing them with us. I encourage each and every one of you to look up the Modern Lady podcast, follow Michelle on Instagram. It's Sachs, MMSACHS on Instagram. You can follow us on Instagram, 3 words, Catholic Moms Group. And if you're interested in starting a Catholic Moms Group, that's what I do. I help train Catholic mothers group leaders. I always say I'm not a theologian, but I'm pretty good at training leaders in the ministry. So anyway, I want to thank each and every one of you for joining us today. It's a real gift to have you. I would ask for you to pray for Michelle, pray for her children, pray for her ministry. And if through this week you can pray for Monica, and Paul, the bride and groom, as they prepare for the wedding. And if you could pray for me, because I'm going to be a mother-in-law. That could be either a good thing. Oh, that could be either a good thing or a bad thing. I don't know. But anyway, I'm going to try to do the best that I can. So thank you, everyone. Do you have any closing thoughts, Michelle, before we go?
Maybe just the quote from St. Hildegard's fellow doctor of the church, St. Catherine of Siena, one of my favorite quotes: "Be who God meant for you to be, and you will set the world on fire." Yeah. And I'll be praying for your daughter and her soon-to-be husband next week, Dorothy. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, and as I like to close, I'm so glad we had this time together, just to have a laugh or pray a prayer. Seems we just get started, and before you know it, comes a time we have to say so long. Mwah, mwah, mwah. Please know that you are loved. We offer a mass every single week for all of the moms that are connected with our network. So we're praying for your intentions. And we ask you to pray for ours. If you feel called to make a donation through PayPal, you can. Catholic Moms Group, there is a PayPal button, a donation button. We'd love to grow the ministry, but we need help. Anyway, so thank you very much, each and every one of you. And thank you again, Michelle. You're a gift to the church. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me, Dorothy. And thanks, everyone.
Yeah.
See you next time, maybe.
Michelle, have you always homeschooled, or are you new to homeschooling?
I am new to homeschooling. So we came home with everybody during the pandemic, and that was the start of our homeschooling journey formally. Yes.
Yeah. So maybe one day we can talk about that one day. Anyway. Okay. Right. Okay. Thank you very much. Okay. Bye-bye.
Okay. Thanks, Dorothy.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.